The pandemic created at least 40 new big pharma billionaires. Pharmaceutical corporations like Moderna and Pfizer made $1,000 of profit every second from the COVID-19 vaccine. More than two-thirds of Congress received campaign funding from pharmaceutical companies in the 2020 election. All I'm querying is this.
Yes.
Is if you have an economic system in which pharmaceutical companies benefit hugely from medical emergencies, you are going to generate states of perpetual crisis where the interests of ordinary people separate from the interests of the elite.
Hello, good people. It is Todd Shannon, data scientist, social commentator, and getter of buckets. And what are we talking about today? We're talking about strategically timed assault allegations, heretofore known as stale allegations. What's a stale allegation? A stale allegation is something like this. It's when someone waits an inexplicably long amount of time to report an alleged assault, sexual assault that is, coincided with very, very odd and peculiar timing about that allegation, i.e., the person who is alleged to have done the assault is being nominated for the Supreme Court, for example, or running for president, or in the case of Russel Brand, suddenly coming into kind of prominence about some controversial political opinions that he has, such that it's pretty clear that there are certain parties who might gain from him being defamed or smeared or discredited for those opinions. Now, Russel Brand is the latest victim of the so-called stale allegation, right? The oddly timed allegation that coincides with some prominence that he's recently obtained. And I just want to talk about these stale allegations because they're actually quite easy to deal with if anybody wanted to actually deal with them. This is what we could do if we really wanted to eliminate these stale allegations. Eliminate the possibility of all criminal and or civil charges if the allegation doesn't take place within a year of the alleged event. If a woman waits 366 days to report a case of assault, they forfeit any civil benefits, nor can the man be charged criminally. Now that might sound aggressive, but you'll see in a moment how many problems this would solve. You see, anytime something is easy to fix and nobody fixes it when it needs to be fixed, that means that somebody wants it to remain broken. And I think this is one such example of a thing that some people want to remain broken. Why? Because it's such a powerful tool politically if you wield it in the right way. Or in this case, I would say the wrong way, in an unjust way. Now, let's talk about all of these things that this sort of limitation would actually eliminate. Let's think about this. The first thing that these stale allegations actually introduce is unnecessary conflicts of interest about the motives of the accuser. Now, what have we been told all this time? We've been told by the left that they just want you to believe all women. Believe all women. Women should not be met with a raised eyebrow of skepticism whenever they make such a serious charge about such a deeply personal and potentially traumatic situation. Well, I agree with you. We don't want to be further victimizing women by giving them the third degree whenever they make an accusation or come to report their trauma. But when they are unnecessarily and weirdly timed with all of these, sometimes decades and decades between the alleged event, coinciding with an oddly timed accusation that can severely hurt the person right before they take an important step in their lives, then you can't complain that people are meeting them with skepticism because the nature of the allegation itself is riddled with conflicts of interest. So if you want to believe all women, if you want people to believe all women, then get rid of the stale accusation. Put a time limit on it. The second thing that is really important to note that would be eliminated if we put this time limit on it is that the longer there is between the alleged event and when it was reported, the more likely it is for the victim to forget very key details that might be important to get a conviction. Now, everybody remembers Brett Kavanaugh in his case when he was nominated to the Supreme Court, and a certain woman, whose name I will not mention, happened to come forward and say that, decades prior, there was an actual assault that took place, a sexual assault that took place with her. She couldn't corroborate with a single witness anything that had happened. She couldn't remember the exact date. There were just tons of details that she was fuzzy on. She would not be specific. And so all of those things happened because it was a stale accusation. Just imagine if she had had the opportunity to make those allegations within a year of them happening. All of the people who could have corroborated could have likely been easily contacted. Their testimony could have been recorded, and it could have been a fair trial. Instead, we're decades later, where no one can remember anything, even if it had happened. Those important details have been degraded by time. So we put a time limit on it, that issue goes away. But I want to bring another, I think, even more egregious example of this, because this one to me is the most inexplicable that I've ever seen. And it's E. Jean Carroll and her allegations against one Donald J. Trump, President Voldemort, he who shall not be named, who I'm obviously naming. But let's have a look at what she said, because this is so bizarre. This to me is the most egregious case I can think of.
You don't feel like a victim?
I was not thrown on the ground and ravished, which the word rape carries so many sexual connotations. This was not sexual. It hurt.
But I think most people think of rape as it is a violent assault. It is not.
I think most people think of rape as being sexy. Most people think of rape as being sexy.
Let's take a short break.
Think of the fantasies.
We're just going to take a quick break. If you can stick around, we'll talk more on the other side.
You're fascinating to talk to.
What? What in the world was that? Now, if you're not familiar with the E. Jean Carroll case, let me just give you a quick rundown. She claims that Mr. Trump assaulted her in a department store in the middle of the day in a busy store full of shoppers, supposedly in a dressing room. Nobody saw it. No one could corroborate it. It happened decades earlier. And I'm sorry, if you're trying to be a credible accuser, are you going to sit there and say that the thing that you are alleging is so traumatic and so awful that happened to you that it's sexy? That's weird. But it gets even weirder, because I want you to understand what the outcome of this case was. Now, I don't need to build the case up that there are political motivations to smear Mr. Trump. I mean, I don't think I need to make that case. I think you can understand the obvious conflicts of interest. The decades between the supposed event and the accusations are, to say the least, odd and suspect. But apparently jurors didn't find that all that strange at all, because they ended up awarding her a $5 million award. Let's have a quick look. E. Jean Carroll wins another victory over Trump after sex abuse and defamation lawsuit. I'm going to skip down here because I don't want to read all of this, but I just want to read the part that I found really, really interesting. It says, the first trial this spring concerned the sexual assault allegation and whether some of Trump's comments about her in 2022 were defamatory. Now, just let that wash over you. She's accusing him of assault, but his comments about her are defamatory? Sure, that's interesting. Jurors awarded Carroll $5 million, finding that she was abused, but that she was not ravaged against her will. I don't want to say the R word. I just have, what does that even mean? What does it mean? I have no idea what that means. You heard what her testimony is, what she said on Anderson Cooper. Anderson Cooper, first of all, was so uncomfortable. He's just like, let's go to break.
Let's take a short break.
Think of the fantasies.
We're just going to take a quick break. If you can stick around.
She was so weird. She was completely not credible. She couldn't corroborate a thing that she said. And then they said, well, yeah, she was abused, but not ravaged against her will. There again, I'm trying not to say the word. She said that intercourse took place. She said that it took place. So just think about this. If this trial had happened, if there would have been a legal proceeding within a year of this alleged event, then one of two things would have happened. They would have found Mr. Trump guilty and he would have went to prison, or they would have dismissed the case and she wouldn't have gotten a dime. That's the way the law should work. That's not the way it works now, because there are a whole lot of people politically motivated with stale, strategically timed accusations of assault. And now we got people, now there's a whole cottage industry of perverse incentives to make accusations that are, even if they're even mildly credible, or even if there's even just a little shred of evidence but no real proof, then that can get people millions of dollars. We don't want to create a system with these sorts of perverse incentives. And like I said, things that are easy to fix but end up not getting fixed, it's because someone wants them to remain broken. And to me, this is very similar to the Democrats and their claim that they don't want, 9-month term abortions, right? If they say that, they say they don't want them, but then the question is, okay, well, if you don't want them, then why don't you outlaw them? But then they won't do that either. And you see, this little shell game is how they play the game. The same thing can be true of this. If you really want us to believe all women, get rid of the stale accusations. If you do that, you will create the right incentives to make the accusations, and you will greatly increase the opportunity to convict all these alleged, sexual assaulters. I don't want to say the R word, because you'll be making that accusation within a reasonable time frame such that the evidence can be gathered to convict them if, in fact, they are the assailants. And what about all of these women letting these violent men roam the streets ready to assault the next woman because they supposedly had some emotional hang-up about coming forward? We have to really get past this. These stale accusations can be solved easily if we want to solve them, but I don't think we want to solve it. And that brings me back to Russell Brand. I got to be honest with you. I don't know whether or not these women are telling the truth. Mr. Brand, obviously, he's noted in his own words that he was very promiscuous. So let that be a note to you men. You're thinking you're smashing and dashing and getting away with it. No, you aren't. You know who will almost have zero opportunity or zero possibility of accusing you of assault? Your wife. That's why you're supposed to be in those relationships with a woman to whom you are committed. But, Mr. Brand thought he was living it up, think he was having his cake and eating it too. So let's not try to paint Mr. Brand as some sort of saint or some sort of victim, because the truth of the matter is he put himself in this situation, but that doesn't mean that he did what was accused or what he was accused of doing. And if we had any interest in making sure that the truth came out, we would eliminate these sort of accusations. I say 1 year or you forfeit any possibility of criminal or civil damages. But I'm curious to know what you think. Do you think I'm being a little bit overboard? Do you think I'm taking it too far? Or do you think that women should be given basically carte blanche to make any accusation they want in any time frame for any reason? And with these situations where there are obvious perverse incentives to make these accusations and smear people's reputation. I think that we should get rid of it, but I'm curious to know. What do you think? If I'm wrong, let me know. Put it in the comments. Till next time, friends, God bless you.